way we got the idea for this experiment was I went to a concert and I was hearing one of my favorite pieces, the Mozart Piano Concerto, and it just left me flat. And I thought, well, how can that be? You know, it's got this beautiful set of notes. The composer wrote this beautiful piece. What is it the pianist is doing to mess this up? And I spoke with one of my doctoral students about it, Anjali Bhatara, and she was very interested in the question also, and how we might pursue this with the techniques of a modern psychological laboratory. One of the interesting things about the piano is that all of the expressive nuance that comes from it comes from really just a definable set of parameters that the pianist has under his or her control. Pianist can decide when to hit the key, when to let up the key, how hard to hit it, and then where to put the pedal. And everything that we hear, whether it's tears of joy or tears of boredom, comes from those 4 decisions that the pianist makes. These are a small enough set of things that we can manipulate them in the laboratory. So Anjali took performances by a master concert pianist, Tom Plant, from our McGill Music Conservatory, Chopin pieces, and then Anjali went into the computer and manipulated them, editing out all of the expressive nuance that comes from variations in timing and variations in loudness. So again, what separates an emotional performance from a non-emotional one is the pianist is making some notes louder and some softer, and some faster and some slower. And it's that variation that gives it the expressivity. Well, Anjali got rid of all of that and brought it to a really robotic performance, and then added in the computer, systematically, little bits of expression, a little bit at a time, creating a continuum of emotional versions. We used a specially prepared piano, the Yamaha disc clavier, which has a bunch of motors underneath every key and a bunch of sensors. When a pianist sits down, the keys register through the sensors all of the touch parameters, when the key was hit, when it's released, how hard. And then the motors allow us to replicate the performance. It's an electronic, elaborate, computerized player piano. Okay, I'm going to play you different versions of some musical pieces by Chopin. And just listen and write down on a scale of 1 to 10 how expressive you find each piece to be, with 1 being the least expressive and 10 being the most. We then brought people into the laboratory and they listened to these different versions in random order. They had no idea what we had done or what they were listening to, and their task was simply to rate on a scale of essentially 1 to 100, or 1 to 10, depending on the condition, how expressive or how emotional do you find this piece to be. Here's another one. People love watching the piano play on its own. We got this through a federal government program, the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. They bought us 3 of these specially prepared pianos to do just this kind of work. They found the task easy. They understood it. They understood that effectively they had to rank order the performances by assigning a score between 1 and 10. And the astonishing thing was that even though they didn't know what we had done, their scores reflected that they understood the rank ordering. We recaptured that order. So they consistently, over all these different pieces and all these different versions, rated the one with the most expressivity as most expressive and the one with the least expressivity as the least, and all the intermediate versions in between. One interesting thing is we brought in both musicians and non-musicians, and we screened them for their background. We found that musicians were more sensitive to the manipulation. In other words, they found a greater disparity between the expressive and the non-expressive than did the non-musicians. Both groups were able to tell the difference between, say, 25% and 50% expressive, but the musicians accentuated the difference in their own minds. They were more sensitive to it.